Well, good evening and welcome, everyone. Welcome to the second in this three-part series entitled Your Data is for the Birds. Tonight's program is titled 125 Years of Audubon's Christmas Bird Counts. My name is Kent Doty. I am the Coastal Conservation Coordinator for Seven Capes Bird Alliance. Just see if I Oops, too far. Sorry about that. There we go. We're thrilled to have partners with us, Oregon Birding Association, the Mid-Willamette Bird Alliance, OSU's Bird Nerds, and Cascade Head Collaborative Biosphere, all our partners. You all do amazing work, and we appreciate you so much. Also, I want to give a shout out for Nissa Parker, our digital media coordinator at Seven Capes, who's been instrumental in making this entire series happen. This is a webinar format we're using, so only the panelists are visible. We miss seeing your smiling faces. The following introductions, our speaker will talk for about 50 minutes to an hour. There'll be plenty of time for question and answer afterwards. You'll find down at the bottom of your screen a Q&A tab. Please enter your questions into that during the presentation or after, and as I mentioned, we will address all the questions following. The program will finish up by about 7:30, and just to let you know, we are recording this. It will be available on Seven Capes channel. So a little bit about us. Seven Capes Bird Alliance, formerly the Audubon Society of Lincoln City, serves Lincoln and Tillamook County since 2006. Our core programs are education, community science, and conservation action. We provide monthly birding outings for all ages and knowledge levels. Our conservation focus areas are rocky habitat, marine reserves, forest practices, water quality, and threats to birds and wildlife, all viewed through the lens of climate change. Learn more about us at sevencapes.org. As I mentioned, this is the second in our autumn three-parts webinar series entitled Your Data is for the Birds. It's an opportunity for citizen-generated data for wildlife and habitat conservation. Be sure and register for the upcoming webinar, the last in the series by Douglas Robinson, that will be all about using eBird, how to access it, how to use it, and how the data is used to further research and understanding. All the webinars are free and all are welcome. Before we get going, I would like to acknowledge the land we are living on. Before the period of white settlement, the land and waters we now occupy are along the Oregon coast. We're home to the Tillamook and Alsea people. It is right and just to recognize these sovereign nations and to remember the disposition they were forced to endure. Despite these losses, Tillamook and Alsea people continue to thrive and act collectively as part of the existing confederations. As we engage with wildlife and the environment that surrounds us today, we pledge to learn from these nations within the Confederated Tribes of the Silex, as well as our neighbors, the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde. We look forward to collaborating on goals. So now, on to the important part, introducing tonight's speaker. We are very, very fortunate to have Cooper Farr with us today. Cooper is the Community Science Manager for the National Audubon Society, where she supports, promotes, and innovates Audubon's current and future community science programs, including Audubon's Christmas Bird Count, Climate Watch, and the Great Backyard Bird Count. Cooper's background is in avian ecology and applied conservation science. She has over 10 years experience in developing and implementing community science programs. And so with that, please give her a warm welcome, and I'll turn it over to Cooper.
All right, thanks very much. I will just share my screen here and we can get started. All right, how's that looking? Look good? Okay. All right, so hello everyone. I'm really happy to be here with you this evening to talk a little bit about the Christmas bird count. Um, all 125, coming up on 126 years of the CBC, and how the data are used for monitoring and conservation. First, let me share the core members of National Audubon's Community Science Team, which is part of our national science team. So I am Cooper Farr, Community Science Manager here at Audubon. I've been at Audubon for about a year and a half now, and I am living in Fort Collins, Colorado. Also on the team, we have Ben Haywood, which is our Director of Community Science. Ben is also relatively new to the team, so he just started in January of this year. And then finally, we have Brooke Bateman, who is the Senior Director of Climate and Community Science. Some of you who may have done the CBC before may have been familiar with Jeff LeBaron. He was the director of the Christmas bird count. He actually worked on the program since 1987, which is super impressive. And Jeff retired last year. And since then, we sort of restructured the community science work slightly. And so instead of the programs having directors, we all work together on the community science work. And yeah, we have support from, other teams, members of our quantitative team and communications team. And so, yeah, what I'll be sharing today is definitely a very collaborative effort, not only from the community scientists who participate in the CBC, but a lot of folks from Audubon as well. All right, and so my colleagues and I, we work on 3 main community science programs for National Audubon. Climate Watch, which is a program that launched in 2016 that explores how North American birds are responding to climate change. The Great Backyard Bird Count, which is a global bird count that happens during a 4-day event each February. We facilitate this program in partnership with the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and Birds Canada. And then, of course, the Christmas bird count, which is what we are here to talk about today. And right, so I'm here presenting as a professional who works on the CBC, but I wanted to start off the presentation by just acknowledging that I came to the CBC like a lot of people do, which is just as a volunteer and as a birder. My background is in wildlife ecology and conservation. I wasn't always focused on birds. So back when I was getting my undergrad, I was working on fish projects and snakes and bats. After I finished up my undergrad, I started getting interested in birds. And the first thing I did really was reach out to my local Audubon chapter in my hometown when I was back for the holidays and asked if I could join the CBC. So that was in Lawrence, Kansas. It was probably around 2010 or 2011. And it was an awesome experience. They paired me up with a really experienced, really welcoming guy and his daughter. And, we went all around the circle, and it was just an amazing experience, the type of experience that I hope many newcomers to the CBC get. And yeah, I was kind of hooked. I got more and more into birds. Since then, I've been doing the CBC just as a volunteer, basically everywhere I've lived, which has been a lot of different places. Most recently, I lived in Utah for about 9 years. So most of these pictures here are from the 2 CBC circles that I did in Utah, which were super fun, but always bitter cold. One of them, we were, walking through a canyon, which was beautiful. Fun things to see, Pacific wrens and American dippers and things like that. Rosy finches sometimes, but yeah, always super cold. Or the other one was along the Jordan River, which is a super interesting urban river in Salt Lake City. Yeah, and then so like I said, I'm in Fort Collins now, so I've been able to join the Fort Collins Circle. Yeah, so I've met some really great people on the CBCs. I've had some really awesome experiences. And I try and approach this work understanding that the program is a really great tradition and opportunity for people, no matter their experience or where they are in their birding journey, because that's where I was when I started with the CBC. All right, so here is what I plan to cover for today's presentation. We'll start with some history, talk about the impact and importance of the CBC, talk a little bit about the people behind the CBC, talk through how to get involved, and just some tips for having a good CBC. I'll provide some resources about how to access CBC data if anyone is interested, and then we can end with a Q&A. So starting out with some background and history of the CBC, including, where we are today and where we are headed in the future. So we will start back when the CBC started at the turn of the 20th century. And so to help put us in the mindset of that time period, I found this really great recolorized photo of a market in New York City. This photo was taken in 1900. And so this is the time that we are talking about when the CBC started. The automobile, it had been invented, but it definitely wasn't in widespread use. That didn't happen until the 20s. Yeah, super interesting time. During this time, the conservation movement actually really started to take flight. So yeah, by 1900, Americans' belief that our continent's wildlife was inexhaustible was definitely displayed actually in the fashion of the day. So hats that contained bird feathers were very popular. And Frank Chapman, who was an ornithologist with the American Museum of Natural History, and the publisher of the Bird Lore magazine. So he wrote about how he went on a walk in Manhattan and he counted 542 people wearing hats that were adorned with, bird feathers or entire birds. And he determined that those feathers or birds that were on those hats totaled 42 different bird species just on this one walk that he went on. So it was really, really popular. And this, unregulated hunting for birds and their feathers resulted in some really big population losses that people started to take notice of, especially for water birds. I think around this time, it was something like 60 bird species were facing extinction because of this fashion trend. So it was within this context where people were starting to become concerned about how humans could impact birds that the idea of the CBC emerged. So Frank Chapman, through the Bird Lore magazine, proposed an alternative to the traditional Christmas side hunt, which was a tradition where teams of hunters would go out on Christmas Day and shoot as many birds as possible to compete with each other. And so he suggested that instead, people should count the birds and then send in their findings to be published in Bird Lore. He thought the findings would be of interest to other people and other participants in this Christmas count, and also that it would constitute a census of Christmas bird life. And so the first CBC happened in 1900. That first year, just 27 very dedicated individuals surveyed 25 different locations across the United States and Canada. They counted 18,500 birds, representing 89 different bird species. And this little count with just, 25 locations became one of the longest running and most important community science projects in the world, I might argue. So I've put a map here on the slide of all of the locations of the first counts. And I would love if you all want to, I think the chat option is available to you. So if you want to guess which species had the highest counts or were detected in most of these circles during that very first year, I'd love to see some guesses for folks. So go ahead and drop in the chat if you have any ideas during this first count, which bird species had the highest numbers that people were counting, and or were on the most circles across this area. Passenger pigeon, that's an interesting one, yeah. Any other guesses? Like turkey, oh, interesting. Yeah. Other guesses are welcome. It's just for fun. Robin, good guess. All right. Dark-eyed junco, interesting. All right, I'm going to go ahead and reveal the answers. I have some other fun trivia coming up, so I'm hoping you all will. Oh, Canada geese, yep. Well, yeah, bear with me and drop more guesses in the future when I have more trivia things. So let's see what we have here. Okay, so here are the answers. Highest counts. This is, summed up across all of these different CBCs. Herring gull, some type of crow species, and then red-winged blackbirds. And in the most circles, chickadees, crows, and American tree sparrows. So there you go. I think it's super fascinating to go back and look at the data and see what people are seeing. So, all right. So before we move into kind of where the CBC has gone since 1900, I also wanted to mention here that I don't know if everyone knows this, but the CBC is actually older than the National Audubon Society itself. So the first Audubon Society, Massachusetts Audubon, was organized by two Boston environmentalists in 1896. And then after that, a bunch of different Audubon societies started springing up. But then on January 5th, 1905, that's when leaders came together from around 30 different Audubon Society type organizations and formed the National Association of Audubon Societies for the Protection of Wild Birds and Animals. That was the full name. And that group was later to be, formed into the National Audubon Society. So the CBC is older than the organization that runs it. All right, so let's take a look here at the CBC over the years. So this graph just shows the number of CBC circles in different countries or regions. And each little bar is each year, right? So the first one is 1900 and the last one is this most recent count, the 125th last year. So I wanted to show you this growth of the program and also point out some interesting things that have kind of happened along the way that you can see emerging from this graph. So the first thing, there's like a slight dip over here. So while not, official CBCs, the Bird Lore magazine did publish some reports from American soldiers stationed in France that did bird counts during World War I during this time. They sent over their data and Bird Lore published it, which is really interesting. You can see a little dip over here that there was a slight dip in participation during the Great Depression. And another dip during World War II, right there. Right in here, you can start to see the spread of the CBC south of the US border. So the first CBCs in other countries other than the United States and Canada were in Belize, Puerto Rico, Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, the US Virgin Islands. There's an interesting little dip here in the 90s where there was a federal government shutdown that closed a lot of refuges and parks, and many people decided to cancel their count that year. And then, of course, this most recent dip that you can see is the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's the biggest interruption to the CBC in recent history. But we've kind of grown those numbers back since the pandemic. All right, so that kind of brings us to the CBC today. And the CBC, yeah, it's expanded to thousands of counts involving tens of thousands of participants across the entire Western Hemisphere. The data that are collected are accessible to anyone who wants to use any of it, and it's become a really valuable resource for scientists, for conservationists, for policymakers. And it also, it represents more than just data collection, like all of these community science programs. It's really a community tradition. It brings together people all across the hemisphere from all different backgrounds and experience levels in service of bird conservation. So yes, last year's count was a big one. It was the 125th CBC. So I wanted to pull out a few highlights from that count. We had over 44 million birds counted, representing over 2,400 species. Oh yeah, I put the actual number of species here. So we had actually 2,503 species, plus 426 identifiable forms and hybrids. We had a great year for new species documented on the count. We had 39 new species. And the reason for this is that we had 3 new circles that were established in Peru. And we had a few circles in Peru, like in the 90s, but they weren't very active. But I'm really excited that we have these 3 new circles in some new areas. So we got some really great new species. Yeah, so 90% of those new species were in those new circles. Something I did want to point out that's demonstrated in the graphs that are along the bottom of the slide. So we have consistent increases in the number of circles surveyed and the number of participants, the number of effort that people are putting into going out and counting birds. And so we see this rise. But the total raw counts of birds, as you can see over on the right-hand side, that has been steadily declining. So, there's more circles, so more land area and more people out counting birds, and yet still we're seeing decreases in the number of birds that we're counting. This number, the pattern we've noticed is most prominent since about the year 2014, where you start seeing some real dips in the count numbers. And it's definitely, a reminder of what we all know, that bird declines are happening. And it's really important to use conservation efforts to slow or reverse these declines that we're seeing. Let's see. So yeah, I wanted to pull out some fun highlights in terms of the species that were detected in the 125th CBC. Each year we get new species. It's always fun to see what shows up. Some notable finds that happened last year. There was a yellow-headed caracara documented in Galveston, Texas. That's a bird that hangs out mostly in South America, like a little bit up into Central America. And so that was a new species for the US. There's a stellar sea eagle in Newfoundland, which of course are, over on the east coast of Asia. So that was an exciting one. There was a stellar sea eagle that was previously documented, but only during count week, during the 122nd count. So this is the first time it was documented officially on a CBC count day. And then, as I mentioned, there were a ton of great species out of Peru that were added to the list. So I just picked one that I thought was really fun. The creamy crested spine-tail was one of those many new species out of Peru. So always fun to see those pop up. All right. So yes, the CBC is 125 years strong. And it's getting even better. Some of you may have heard that over the next 3 years or so, Audubon is investing in transforming the CBC to enhance the experience for participants and welcome new communities across the Americas. So we will be making updates to all aspects of the program, from how people learn about, how to join the CBC to especially the technology that's used to support the effort. So things like the data entry platform and how people can access the data. So it's a really exciting new venture for us. And if any of you have used some of the old platforms, you know that they're in need of a refresh. So we're really excited to be able to work on this project. Okay, I've got another little question for you all if you want to pop in the chat. Okay, so last year, of all of the counts that happened last year, what's the smallest, lowest number of species that were tallied on a circle? So yeah, drop a number in. You can guess where the circle might have been that had just the smallest number of species tallied. Any guesses? This is across the full hemisphere. Oh, we have a 3 guess. Anyone else? 5, okay. All right. Let's see. All right, everyone else, if you're too scared to put your answer, 15, okay. All right. All right, here we go, revealing. The answer is 3. So Kathy, you got it. Yes, so 3 species were tallied in Rankin Inlet, Nunavut, which were the common eider, willow ptarmigan, and common raven, which are 3 good species. This is up 1 from the previous count, which just had 2 species tallied. So I thought that was fun. All right, and another one. So we guessed the smallest. How about the largest number of species, like the count with the most species? What number of species did they get? Any guesses? You can drop it in the chat. 425. Okay. 250. All right. 200. Okay. Any other guesses? All right. Steve was closest, but I guess you went over. I don't know if we're doing Price is Right rules, but yeah, so 402 species documented at a count in Ecuador last year, which is a lot of species, way more than my circles ever get. All right. All right, we will move on, talk about the importance of the CBC and how we use CBC data. So yeah, the CBC, it's one of the longest running crowdsourced bird surveys in the world, and it's a really rich source of information for making decisions on how to protect birds and the habitats they need. So it's not just about counting birds, it's about like checking the pulse of the ecosystem. It really powers conservation science in a lot of different ways. A great example of this is the landmark 3 billion birds study that many of you might be familiar with. This study was published in 2019 It documented population changes of over 500 bird species in the US and Canada, and Christmas bird count data was one of the main data sources. And the study was not only able to document really widespread population losses, but also it was able to identify different groups of birds that are the most imperiled. That includes grassland birds, aerial insectivores, migratory species, and birds of the boreal forest. And out of this study came a big, awareness and communication campaign about what people can do to help birds, including 7 simple actions that anyone can take. Things like making your windows bird safe and reducing plastic use and drinking shade-grown coffee. There is a website dedicated to this, 3 Billion Birds, and many different organizations, bird conservation organizations, have partnered together to create some resources and education material for folks kind of out of this study. And yeah, so spanning 125 years, the CBC has also seen extinctions. I've pulled out some examples of species that had been detected on CBCs that are now extinct or presumed extinct. So yeah, just to run through a few of these, the ivory-billed woodpecker was detected on CBCs in 1929, 1933, and 37, and is now presumed extinct. The heath hen, which is a greater prairie chicken subspecies, was detected in 1908 on a CBC and declared extinct in 1932. These 2 Hawaiian bird species, which I'm not going to pronounce because I will butcher the pronunciation, but were detected, in the 70s and early 80s, and then declared extinct in 2022 and 2023. And then the Atitlan grebe, also detected in the 70s and declared extinct in 1989. Yeah, so the CBC has, been able to document bird declines and disappearances, of course, but it's also been able to document conservation successes, which are always important to pull out and understand, so we have things to learn from as we go forward. So a great example of this is the impacts of DDT and then subsequent recoveries of different species. So the program saw some really steep declines of raptors and other species impacted by DDT, especially in the 1940s through 60s. And then Audubon was actually really instrumental in pushing to get DDT banned. But once it was banned in 1972, the CBC was then able to document the recovery of many of these species that were impacted. So I'm going to be showing a few of these maps to you in the next few slides. But these maps basically show by color percent changes in the CBC abundance index, which represents how many birds are, the population size basically, but it is an index. And so in this case, the purples represent positive changes in this abundance index, with the darker being more positive. So right, you can see bald eagle, peregrine falcon, both making increases in more recent years. Another example of how the CBC has tracked conservation successes is with many species of waterfowl. So we've seen waterfowl doing really well in response to hunters and conservationists working on wetland protection and restoration. Waterfowl in general overall have increased by 56% over the past 50 years. And I've pulled out just a couple ducks that demonstrate this trend as well. You can see with the very positive percent changes shown for reddy duck and ringneck duck here. And of course, more and more, especially in recent years, the CBC is being used to measure how birds are responding to climate change. So for example, a 2022 Audubon study used CBC data to examine northward shifts in where many species are spending their winters. And it's important to document these changes, not just to know that it's happening, but also because we can use this information to prioritize conservation efforts in areas that are important for birds, not only today, but in a climate altered future as well. So I pulled out some examples of range shifts as well. So here we have the hairy woodpecker and white-crowned sparrow. So the purple still means like an increasing percent change in this abundance index. And then the redder colors means decreasing. So you can see in these southern areas, you've got like decreasing populations. And in the northern areas, you've got you see this increase. So that shows this shift in where these birds are occurring during the winter. Another example that can be really clearly tracked with CBC data are some of the tropical hummingbirds that are moving northward. So I've pulled out here the rufous hummingbird and buff-bellied hummingbird, again, both recently seen, shifting into the southern regions of the US during the winter. Yes, so CBC data are available to anyone who wishes to use them. This program has fueled, a ton of really interesting studies over the years. Hundreds of scientific articles have been published, articles that came from analyses that were done with CBC data. We do rely on folks to report their studies to us, so we don't have a comprehensive list. We say over 300. It's probably a lot more than 300. But we do, whenever someone tells us about a study using CBC data, we add it to a CBC bibliography that we keep on our website. So yeah, I'd encourage you all, if you're interested, to go check it out. You can find it from the main CBC webpage, which I'll talk about in a second, how to get there. And then, yeah, it's just right on the webpage. You can look at the CBC bibliography. So lots of super interesting studies to look at there. Okay, another trivia question. All right, so which birds now, or for the last CBC, are the most widespread, meaning that they were detected on the most circles across the entire CBC? Drop in the chat any guesses. Species that are in, occur in most of the circles. Crow, gulls, American robin, starling. Yes, starlings, yep, got a couple guesses there. Other thoughts? Let's see, I've talked about one of them recently that no one has guessed yet. One of my examples in the last section. Mallard. It's a good guess. Yeah. Ravens. All right, I love all these answers. Thanks for guessing, playing along. All right, here we go. Here are the 5 species that are detected, across the most circles. Yep, topping out the list is the European starling. And then downy woodpecker, rock pigeon. I don't think anyone said either of those. Or we got house sparrow. Yes, yeah, Nancy guessed house sparrow as well. And then bald eagle also, which I thought was kind of cool. So there you go. All right. All right, so we wouldn't have all of this really great, rich data without the thousands of volunteers who actually participate in the program. So I wanted to take a minute to talk about the people behind the CBC. Right, so we regularly have, over 2,500, 2,600 circles that are counted each year. So this is like what it takes to conduct CBCs for all of these different circles. The CBC is set up so that people pick one 24-hour period from within the count period, which is December 14th to January 5th, to count all of the birds within a 15-mile diameter circle. And right now we have around 83,100 participants that go out and collect these data, sometimes on multiple circles. Right now that split is at like 72,400 field counters and then 10,600 feeder counters. Then we have over 3,700 compilers that receive the data from all of the participants, consolidate it, and then enter it into the data entry platform. And then we have around 50 regional editors that actually review all of the data that have been entered, check it for errors, follow up on rare species, and then confirm the data as final. So this is like a huge effort involving many, many people. Yeah, we at National Audubon are really grateful for, everyone who participates in this program because it's a lot of work and we truly couldn't do it without everyone, all of the volunteers. We have seen fairly steady participant growth in the count. So yeah, I put up this graph just from the 90th count to the 125th, which was last year's, showing the number of participants. We did have that dip for COVID-19, but we have bounced back in recent years. And I mentioned our modernization project. So one component that we are really focusing on for that modernization is the, process by which people learn about the CBC and sign up. We want to make it easier and maybe less intimidating for folks who are maybe new to the program or new to birding, because it really is a program where people of many different birding abilities and skills can contribute in different ways. So we are piloting some new roles and some new registration systems this year to kind of explore some of the different ways that this could be done. One of the things that we're considering is creating a formalized community engagement leader role. And that's a person, a volunteer role, who can support the compilers in really focusing on recruiting and organizing participants. So we've got some folks that are trying out that role this year. And yeah, we're going to see what we learn and try to have some really great tools and resources by the next year's count, which is 127. And one thing that we really appreciate and don't want to lose sight of is that the CBC just really means a lot to the people who participate in it. In many cases, this is an annual tradition. We have people who've been doing it for years and years and years. It's a really social community science program. Many participants share meals during the count day, whether that's like lunch in the middle of, out when you're out birding, or like a compilation, potluck dinner, something at the end of the day. It really is like a great and social event for folks. And we really do want the CBC to be open to anyone who wants to participate. One of the things we've been working on is how to make the CBC more accessible, to folks maybe with disabilities. So we have partnered with Birdability, which is a really great organization that works to make sure that birding is for everybody, regardless of disability or other health concerns. And Birdability has developed some great guidelines on how to host an accessible or a partially accessible CBC. So they have a great resource that's hosted on their webpage, but linked from ours, that kind of goes through a lot of things to think about. And then they have this really awesome map, which I have here on the slide, has a bunch of different locations and then like accessibility information for these locations. It's zoomed into the US, but it's across the hemisphere. And it makes it a lot easier to think about planning, count locations where you're going to host different events. So I definitely encourage you all to check it out if you haven't already. And then a big focus for us in the coming years is our growth in Latin America and the Caribbean. So the CBC, of course, it's a hemispheric program, but historically, many of the circles have been located in the United States. I have this fun animated map going here that shows you all of the circles that came online in different decades. And yeah, you can see, well, you will be able to see soon that we have been seeing some recent growth in Latin America, especially during the past few years. So yeah, during the past several years now, over half of all of the new circles that are proposed to the program to be added are located in Latin America and the Caribbean. And we're really trying to grow that momentum in the upcoming years. Kind of with a few strategies. So first, our modernization, it'll bring a lot more multilingual resources and platforms. So our plan is to offer our new data entry platform and all of the associated training materials in English, French, and Spanish, beginning at next year's count. And then we are also hiring a senior coordinator of community science for Latin America and the Caribbean. Just kind of a mouthful of a title, but we're super excited to have someone on board to, again, like help facilitate this growth in Latin America and the Caribbean. And this recent growth of CBCs in these areas has actually meant that we are starting to have enough years of data to be able to produce population trends for different species within the Latin American region, which is really exciting. So Tim Meehan, who is our quantitative ecologist who works a lot on CBC data, he's been really busy running models to create these trends. And we're hopeful that we'll have a dashboard built so people can explore the data really easily. Within in the next month or so. So coming really soon. So not only is this really valuable winter data about the birds in these regions, and in some cases, these are the species that are spending the breeding season up in the US. But I think it's also a great way to like celebrate and thank all of the efforts of the folks who have been running CBC's circles in these countries for a while now. So that's very exciting. All right, another trivia here. If anyone wants to guess where the northernmost and southernmost CBC circles are, go ahead and guess. Aha. Yep, got some good guesses for the northernmost there. Tierra del Fuego. All right. All right. I'm going to show you. Here they are. So it really stretches across the entire hemisphere, which is really, really pretty cool to see. So yes, Nunavut is the northernmost in Arctic Bay. And the southernmost is Drake Passage, which is actually a CBC that is done completely by boat by a research vessel that's in the Atlantic Ocean, just off the coast down there at the tip of South America. So definitely, very widespread program. All right, so yeah, hopefully I've convinced you about the importance of the CBC. And I'm going to spend some time now talking about just how to get involved in the CBC. And this should be relevant whether or not you are already involved. I'll have some tips, some reminders, some things to think about to help you have a successful CBC this year. So the CBC, each circle is organized by its own compiler. Many have their own way of, advertising to their chapters or organizations or audiences. And yeah, that's totally fine. But whether or not that's the case in your local area, you can also find information about the CBCs that are able to be joined on the Audubon website. So if you just type in christmasbirdcount.org, it'll direct you right to that site. And then if you are interested in joining the count, you can click that top button there, which has the arrow pointed at it. And there's also lots of other fun things to explore on the website. So yeah, definitely encourage you to check it out. But yes, so if you're interested in joining, you would click on that top button. You'd hit a screen that talks about, basically what you need to join. And then there's a link to our Circle Finder map, which is a map of all of the circles that are currently listed as active in our system. There's a little search bar at the top, which you can type in like a specific address, a town, or if you know the name of the circle that you're interested in joining, you can actually type that in as well. And you'll get zoomed in to an area. You can click on these individual circles and it'll pop up a box that has information about the circle and then the compiler's name and contact info, the count date if the compiler has put it in our system, and then a comment box that talks about instructions on how to join the count. Right now, it really varies from circle to circle. Sometimes, you just need to email the compiler. Sometimes you need to show up at a certain spot, the morning of the count and get assigned to a team then. Sometimes there's a pre-registration through a sign-up form, but that should be, if you go explore the map, you can see what is available for the circles that you're interested in joining. And then I mentioned this a little earlier, but people can participate in the CBC in two different roles, so field counters or feeder counters. So starting with field counters, these are people who are organized into teams, parties, assigned different sectors, and they go out into the field and count the birds. So they're counting all species seen and heard in their area and then tracking their effort data. A few tips to think about if you're going out as a field counter for a CBC. Before you head out, just make sure you know what data you need to collect and what data you need to report back, either to maybe your sector leader or your compiler. Something that can be challenging for CBC participants is the tracking of the effort data, which is super important, but can be a little tricky. So I'm going to go over that in a second. It's always good if you can to scout the route beforehand. So you can access certain areas, you're aware of any safety things to think about, and also so you can get an idea for which birds might be there. It is important to document any rare birds that are seen. And then, of course, dress for the weather, have a plan for food. Yeah. All right, and then feeder counters are folks who count birds at bird feeders within the designated count circle area. So many times, this is just if your house happens to fall within a CBC circle area, you could just count birds at your backyard. In this case, again, you are counting the birds. And then you also need to track effort data at your feeder. It looks slightly different for feeder counters. Some tips for success for feeder counting specifically is that you're really going to want to look for the maximum number of each species that are visible or within earshot at any one time and have that be your count. Chickadees love to come in, grab a seed, leave, come in, grab a seed, leave. And so you don't want to keep adding chickadees every time you see a chickadee at your feeder because it's probably just a same individual bird that's just visiting the feeder multiple times. Again, make sure you know how to collect the effort data. And then also make sure that you're coordinating with the compiler so that the compiler and all the field teams know where your feeder is, so they're not accidentally counting birds that are maybe like in your feeder area. So you don't want to double count those birds. All right, so effort data. It's really important for putting the bird numbers into context. Like this is what makes the CBC data able to be analyzed is the fact that we have effort data for the people who are counting the birds. But yeah, it can be a little confusing, so just wanted to touch on it really quickly. Basically, we just need to know how many people spent time counting, how long they spent, and the area that was covered. So in this case, we both want to know like the actual number of observers, but then the number of parties that those observers were kind of clumped into, as well as feeder watchers, and then the hours that people spent counting birds. People will be documenting the distance that's covered in the field. But this is the one-way distance. So if you do an out and back, it's just one way that you're counting. And then we also note the method by which the field observer is traveling. So whether they're counting birds on foot or in their car, we have people, counting birds on dog sled or horse carriage. So whichever way, the method of travel, we also note that as well. We often get asked if people can use eBird to collect data for their CBC, and the short answer is yes, but only if the compiler feels comfortable accepting data this way. Um, so yes, there's a really great resource that eBird, Audubon, and Birds Canada all produced together with a lot of really detailed information about like how to use eBird for your CBC. I put the URL up there, but it's kind of a long URL. But basically, if you Google eBird Christmas bird count, that'll be the first article that pops up. Um, that has a lot of great information. We are super excited that with our modernization, our updated data entry platform will have a way to easily accept and incorporate eBird checklists into it. But for at least this upcoming count that's coming up very soon, we don't have the two data entry platforms synced in any way. And so that's where this article will really come in handy in like showing you how to use eBird if you want to, but still get your CBC data into the system like we need it. So yeah, just some tips, nominate someone as a recorder for that party. You want to create multiple eBird checklists, and then you can compile everything afterwards, like using the trip report tool, which is really handy. You'll need to, track weather and make sure that you are tracking effort the way that CBC needs effort to be entered. And then it might be the case, right, if you're doing eBird checklists that you would see the same individual bird on multiple lists. And with eBird, right, you just put all the birds that you see, on that checklist. But with CBC, you really want to make sure that you're not double counting those, individual birds. So you'll just need to like compensate for that when you're reporting your data to your compiler. Another question we get asked a lot is if people can use Merlin on their CBCs. Right, so Merlin is a mobile phone app. It's released by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. It's really great. There are species accounts and photos and photo and audio ID functions. And the audio ID especially can be really helpful in helping to learn birds by ear. But it isn't meant to replace our ears. So yeah, we don't want people just pulling up to a birding location, starting Merlin, and then saying that's all the birds that were there. Rather, we want it to be used as a tool to like help folks identify, an unfamiliar bird. So yes, basically, Merlin can be used. You'll want to try and get either, a visual confirmation of the bird or make sure that you agree with Merlin if it's identifying a song. Right, it's not meant to substitute for participants identifying the birds on their own, just as a tool. And basically, if Merlin identifies a vocalization of a species that's neither heard nor independently seen by participants on a CBC, then that species shouldn't be included in the CBC results. So it can be used as a tool, but shouldn't just be used, yeah, point blank. Okay, another trivia for you here, which is the species that have the highest total numbers counted, and I've split these out into the US, Canada, and Latin America. If you want to make some guesses for either of them, maybe start with the US. That's probably what you're the most familiar with. But this isn't widespread, like it's not on the most circles. It's just like total numbers. Yeah, the highest counts. Which species do you think have the highest counts? Any guesses? There could be some overlap with the most widespread species. Red-winged blackbird. It's a great guess right there. Other thoughts? Ducks. Anything else? Starlings. Always a good guess, it seems like. Alrighty, I'm going to show you. There we go. So yeah, you definitely on the right track here. So yeah, red-winged blackbirds top out the numbers for sure. Snow geese, which I don't think anyone guessed. And European starling, that's for the US. For Canada, American crow, Canada goose, and starlings, of course. Latin America, which I've put in the countries that I pulled from for this. Franklin's gull were the top, and then great-tailed grackles and American coots. It's kind of interesting. So there you go. All right, so you may be interested in exploring the CBC data on your own. So I'm just gonna end the presentation here with a really short overview of how to access the data if you are interested. So again, by visiting the christmasbirdcount.org website, you can access historic or current year results by clicking on the button that says Access Count Results. It'll bring you first to a splash page that talks about our terms of use, and then to this results querying tool that I've put some screenshots up here. I do want to note this platform is a little buggy. This is why we're updating our system, because it's kind of old technology at this point. So if you ever are trying to use it and it's not really working for you, there is a raw data request form that's really easy to submit. It's just on that splash page that comes up right before you hit this querying tool. And you can fill that out, and we've got a team of folks who will just send over any data that you are interested in. But if you can get this to work, it's really fun. You can either look at results by the circle or by different species and kind of pull them out for different years and check out the numbers and things. So that's a fun one to look through. And then we also have trend information available for a number of different species. So again, if you're on that christmasbirdcount.org, you can click on the button that says See 100 Years of Data, and that'll bring you to this trend viewer application. So you can select different species, different geographies, different time periods, and you can see little graphs and maps that show the trends for these species, which is really interesting to see. You are also able to download the trend data if you want to, right from this viewer as well. There's a little download button. Okay, I've got 2 minutes left, so I've got a couple more questions that are maybe a little closer to home for you all, which is zooming in a little bit. What is the average number of species documented on the Lincoln City CBC? So you guessed for, yeah, the highest number and the lowest number across all CBCs, but any ideas about what numbers are coming from your local CBCs? Want to drop it in? 33? Other guesses? No? 90? Okay. It's actually 121, which is, yeah, pretty high. I also pulled the Tillamook Bay CBC. I think that's the other one that you all run, or that would be in your area. So again, average number of species. You think it's more or less than the Lincoln City? Any guesses there? 100, okay. A little more than your previous guess. All right, I'll pull it up because we're coming up on time. 135. There you go. Okay, real quick. How about the highest total numbers on the Lincoln City CBC? What species topped out your numbers? It may be a species that you've seen before and have guessed before for having high numbers on CBC counts. Any guesses? Species with the highest total numbers. All right, no more guesses. I'll pull it up. Starlings top out the counts. But some other fun things there. And I'll just put this up since we're, I think, right at time. But again, starlings are your top numbers. But yeah, some gull. Yeah, you got your caucasus gull there. So there you go. All right, so I will wrap up there. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. I've put up the CBC admin email address. So if you email that, you can ask any questions CBC related. We're always happy to help. And then I am happy to take any questions. So yeah, I'll stop sharing. We can send out this email address and maybe the CBC website as well to you all later. And yeah, we'll see if you all have any questions for me. Thank you so much.
Awesome. So right now people are using the chat function to answer the trivia questions. It'd be feel free to put them in there. I can try to keep track. If you want to put questions also in the Q&A function that's down next to, it's down in that same bar at the bottom of your screen, where you find the chat function. Feel free to ask any questions, and I will include that email address as well as the CBC website in my follow-up email, so watch for that. While we wait for any questions, just a reminder to everybody, we do have 3 count circles in our area, in our service area. That's the Lincoln City Count Circle, Tillamook Bay, as well as Yaquina Bay.
I was wondering if that one was you all, but I couldn't tell, so that's awesome.
Lincoln and Tillamook County. So yeah, Yaquina Bay is one of the ones in our area as well. We don't organize that one per se, but we do help spread the word about it. So the information for the Tillamook and Yaquina counts is still coming, and the details on that. But if you want to participate in the Lincoln City count, you can email info@sevencapes.org to get signed up. Anyone have any questions for Cooper? I have a question while we're here. Can you speak to why Christmas? Why December?
Yeah. So a couple of reasons, right? First of all, that's just the history of how the count was started by Frank Chapman. It just happened to be this like alternative to another thing that was happening during the Christmas time. And so, yeah, having data collected at the same time over many years, right, that's super helpful. But I think also there's like a really big strength in having the count happen during the winter. For one thing, it complements really well another really long-running community science, bird monitoring program, which is the North American Breeding Bird Survey. So that one happens during the breeding season, right? And then you have this one during the winter season, so you can get a better picture of, what's happening with birds across different seasons. Yeah, and it's the hope is that we're capturing a time where there is slightly less movement. Birds migrate and move at different times, so it's not perfect, but for the most part, we're getting this time that's after most species that are migratory have like gone to the places that they will be during the winter period. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, it looks like that inspired one question from Nancy. How do bird trends in the CBC correlate with trends in the BBS, the breeding bird surveys?
Yeah, that's a great question, Nancy. And I would say overall, there is correlation in the patterns that are being seen with the CBC and the BBS. Like the big picture declines, right? We're seeing that in both of these counts. It does vary a little bit though, because they're happening in different seasons and like kind of spatially where birds are being counted, where the different programs I think are capturing some of this like range shift that we're seeing with the changing climate and some other things. So yeah, short answer, like yes overall, but there are definitely like different things that each of these programs can help kind of pull out in terms of the population trends and things that are happening during these different seasons.
Another question from Melissa. Is Audubon trying to advertise problems with bird population declines more widely?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yes, like with it, that's like a little bit outside of what I do at Audubon. So, but I will say we have like really great, communication teams that are working on spreading the word about bird population declines and also what people can do to make a difference for birds. Um, in a lot of different ways, we have folks that are working on this from like the policy side of things. Um, Yes, so I would say yes, working on that in a lot of different ways. And I think, yeah, big counts like this really help to get people engaged, to get people caring about birds if you're going out and counting them, and to get people honestly noticing the changes that you can see just by counting in a circle from year to year. That's a great way to see these population declines happening.
Alright. That was our only open question. So anybody, we have a couple more minutes for questions. Please feel free to drop them in the Q&A or the chat. I have both windows open, so I'll see them either way. I had another question that I was thinking about while you were talking, and now I can't remember what it was.
Oh, well, if you think of it again, let me know.
Last call for questions. Nancy also has a comment. The circles are a pretty big area.
They are, yes, they are a big area, which can be a challenge, like from a couple different angles, right? From getting enough folks involved to try and count birds across that area. And also just the scale of how we can interpret the bird data is a bit larger maybe than some other types of counts. We are exploring something that I think would be super interesting, which is a lot of circles, they divide their counts into sectors, right? I don't know if you all do that for your circles, but you divide it into sectors and then, you have people count in the different, sectors or zones. With our modernization, we are like looking at the possibility of having people be able to submit their data and tag it to the specific sector. So you can have like a slightly smaller spatial scale of bird data, like sector by sector, which could mean some really interesting things for how you analyze those data in the future. So I think we're exploring, but I think it's worthwhile for sure. Oh, a larger question. Yeah. Feel free to try and ask your larger question if you want.
It did strike me when you showed that map that was animated of the year to year, the area like the coverage was really impressive as we get, especially North America.
Yep, there are a lot of circles in the US for sure, which is cool. Yeah, sector data helpful. Yep. Yeah, I think in some cases dialing down to that smaller scale can provide some really good and interesting information. So yeah, we're hopeful that'll work out. But even so, like this is a program about like large scale what's happening, with birds across this large area. So even at the large circle level, we do get some very valuable data. But yeah, hopefully we can look a little more into dialing down to the sectors.
Okay, well, I think we can go ahead and close the Q&A since we don't have any more questions coming in. Kent, if you want to take it back over for our closing remarks. Thank you so much, Cooper. That was awesome. Really great overview of the history. Yeah, just all around bang up job.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks so much, Cooper. That was really fascinating. Uh, remember, we do have another webinar coming up December 3rd. And that will be the same Wednesday, 6 to 7:30. It'll be on eBird. And I just want to thank everybody for coming. And I had a slide, but I can't get to it. Just to let you know, there are a number of other community science projects. We mentioned the backyard bird count, the Christmas counts coming up. Other community science projects are the rack line and Lincoln's or Seven Capes Osprey Awareness. So go to our webpage, sevencapes.org, to find out about these other opportunities. And once again, I just wanted to thank Cooper for a really great presentation. I enjoyed it so much. Thank you. And with that, we'll wish everybody a good evening.